Evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with Emmanuel. As you can see, he's doing a little light show there. And JC, we're waiting for Odon. I'm not certain what's happened to Odon LaFontaine, and we're not sure if Paul Ellis can join us. But today we're going to talk more about the origins of Islam, some of the odd origins of Islam, things that have been coming up in the last few years in academia. And slowly now it's being acknowledged by Muslims. You're starting to find more people talking about this. Muslims have obviously not wanted to speak about this. It's embarrassing, but I think it's important that we do. So Islam is Gnostic. It admits in the Sharia to be a Gnostic religion. And there's a few things we have to learn about Gnosticism, about its origins, about what was there before Gnosticism, which really arose in the post-Christian era after the Gospels were written. So let me bring up my my screen. Let's start then. Hello, Bain Bass, Catherine, City Alpha 5. Welcome, Arlette up north, and Mick. So let's learn something very important about Islam, because this is the word of Allah, the creator of the universe, the greatest Allah there ever was. And he tells us in the book of clothes and adornment, it is disliked to have more furniture and bedding than one needs. And Allah's messenger said there should be bedding for a man, bedding for his wife, and a third bed for the guest, and the fourth bed is for Satan. So if you guys have a fourth bed, I recommend you maybe consider bedding. You consider getting rid of that right now.
So, but what happens if you're a Muslim and you have two wives?
And you need a fourth. Look, I don't know. It doesn't go into that kind of detail, but But just so you know, the fourth bed is for Satan. So, so those of you who have four beds, please stop being satanic. Allah's messenger said so. Any thoughts from you, JC, on this very important message from Allah?
Well, I think my math isn't mathing right there, but I wonder, does Satan pay for renting the bed for a night? How does that work? It's a little bit weird, but anyway, it's from Daif Muslim, so I guess it's correct.
And the hammock is for Jibril. Yeah, exactly. This is. What about the king queen size bed? Yeah, then that's for Fat Satan. And we have two double beds. Does that count as four? I think Voss is in trouble. I think Voss is in trouble. So guys, please ask your Muslim friends about this. We'd love to get specifics. We'd love to have details. And I'm sure we're all going to hear suddenly that these are daif. So yeah, but let me start today with this article. This is called On the Origins of Islam and the Quran. This is part 2. Now, part 1 is on the same website. I have linked. There's a linked comment, right? There's a pinned comment, sorry, in the chat, which you guys can refer to find this article. I'm going to drop the link here in the chat again for you. Let me just grab this so that I make sure that I link it again, just so you know. It's here in the chat. It's in the description as well, and it's pinned to the chat on YouTube. So there you go. It's now in the chat, and you can go and read this yourself so you can see what this is. And it's by a Muslim, Jadu Jibril. His name is Jadu Jibril. And he says research studies are demonstrating that there were a large number of religious groupings in the first centuries. And these were Christian Jews, Nazarenes, Nazarene Jews, Christianized Jews. And Muhammad is not presented as an emissary of a call to a new faith. The idea of the superiority of Muslims over non-Muslims may have been a post-Muhammad invention developed during the Abbasid era under Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Any comments from you before we go on?
Well, the only thing that I would say is that Abdul Malik ibn Marwan is from the Umayyads, but it is technically correct. It is the Abbasids, the ones that come later, and the ones that really create things. They go ham on this whole thing. But everything seems to be pointing at Abdul Malik, as during his reign is when a number of things happen, like creating the Masjid al-Aqsa, the Masjid al-Haram, and lots of other things. But yeah, that sounds about right.
All right. So to continue, researchers have come to conclude that there was a purely Jewish-Christian alliance that was very close to the alliance of the Ebionite or, and this is odd, the Elchasite communities. And the question is, who are the Elchasites or the Elchasai, which is going to be very, very important. And it says here, Muhammad may have been employed by a panel of commentators to proclaim in an immortal way the revelation of the true covenant of the caliphs, rather than the revelation of the word, which men rejected as they rebelled against the alliance. So I need to do one thing. So can I just run away for like 15 seconds? I'll be right back. Anything you want to add, please go ahead. I'll be right back in just a moment.
Okay, Emmanuel, I'll let you entertain the crowd.
Yeah, okay. Well, I feel this is very typical, right? I mean, you know more about how Islam got started, but this is very typical of any sect like that. And originally, Islam was a sect like that, and that's, I think, the whole point that's being made here. It's in a long line of Jewish Christian heretical sects, and the way they always start out is by claiming we believe the same thing you believe. They never say, "Oh, we are Gnostics." They never say, "Oh, we worship our prophet." No. They always say, "We worship the same God you worship, and we are not a separate religion. We're the same religion that you believe in, whatever that may be."
Higher level.
Right, and but your clergy, oh, the Catholic clergy, oh, so terrible. They're not telling you the truth, you know. They're keeping the real knowledge, the real gnosis from you, and they're exploiting you. Oh, they're basically like the capitalist in communism, right? They're exploiting you and keeping the wealth and the knowledge from you. So please listen to us. We will provide you now with the true knowledge in your faith. This is not a separate religion. No. This is the true knowledge from your faith that your clergy are keeping from you. That's how they always start out.
Of course. Tell me, Emmanuel, for the audience that doesn't know you so well, you grew up in a very powerful, what is right now a very wealthy, very powerful Gnostic sect. So for you, this is a very personal issue, discussing Gnosticism and Manichaeism, which seems to be at the base of a number of these sects, correct?
Yeah, and that's how they did it as well. That's how they did it back then. That's how they're still doing it today. And there's so many sects like that, but they're always using the same cookie cutter pattern, and it always starts out the way I just described, and that seems to be in line with how Islam started out as well. And yeah.
Secret knowledge. He goes on, in an interview with Layla Qadr for a book, The Three Faces of the Quran, published in 2014, and written in cooperation with Arun Amin Saad al-Din, which is clearly another Muslim name, so it's a bunch of Muslims doing this. The latest historical, archaeological, and biblical research was discussed that elucidated the composition of the Quran. In a gradual process of formation, the book collected together fragments from the Bible, biblical apocrypha, Jewish midrash, and contemporary legends. Usama would love this, but he's not available today. He's on the road. Every tale related in the Quran finds its source in pre-existing texts. JC, didn't we just go through a large number of the tales in the Quran, which we find are literally myths, legends, and comic book stories, which the Quran now claims are the word of Allah?
Yeah, literally what you have just read in this page, it could be a summary of what you have been showing in the last episodes. Exactly that thing, and it looks like even Muslims are starting to realize that.
Yep. So, guys, understand that the Quran is really standing on a foundation of quicksand. And as you start taking it apart historically, archaeologically, going through solid historical evidence, it starts to look extremely shaky. And so it says here, every tale has its source in pre-existing text, and the term tadkir, or reminder, is a phrase that appears more than once in the Quran. And then, according to the Corpus Quranicum research project at the University of Berlin, Brandenburg, which contains a unique collection of the images of the early Quran, it speaks of Himyarite and Aksumite inscriptions, areas where major discoveries have been made over the past half century radically modify the chronology of some of the Quran's borrowings. It has been discovered that terms no less important than salah, prayer, and zakah were already used in Himyarite writing more than 200 years before Islam. Any thoughts from you guys on that, JC?
With the Himyarites, that's actually where they found as well the early inscriptions that actually mentions, well, MHMD Muhammad, related in the Judeo-Christian belief, way before Muhammad. So it looks like things are pointing more and more towards the south of the Arabian Peninsula, right?
Yeah. Yes, and remember, in our monotheism talk, which we cancelled on Monday because we were meeting with Osama on Monday because he wouldn't be available otherwise, I started with the Himyarites and the Aksumites. My whole monotheism thesis, the slides that we did in parts 1 and 2, start off specifically with these Himyarites and Aksumites. That's the Ethiopians and the Yemenis. And here they are referring explicitly to the Ethiopians and the Yemenis. Any comment from you, Emmanuel, or should I go on?
Well, go on.
Okay, so these words are borrowed from other cultures that were using them, and Islam merely just borrowed them. The Quran's borrowing from pre-existing texts, which has Quranic themes such as sensual paradise, in other words, a whorehouse in heaven, penal punishments, Ramadan, saving Abraham from fire by the angel Jibreel, and so on, have been drawn, including the fall of Adam and Eve. And this is a list, not even a full list, I guess, of stories which the Quran has borrowed, or shall we say stolen, plagiarized from other sources. The fall of Adam and Eve, Adam's repentance after the fall, throwing Abraham into the fire, the Jews turned into monkeys and pigs, the sanctity of life. Surat al-Fatiha, that's the opening. Legal penalties, the style of the Arab diviners, paradise in the Quran and in the writings of Mar Ephraim. There is no God but He, jizya, how to fast in Ramadan, the presence of the name Muhammad, and kufr. So these are all things that pre-existed Islam and pre-existed Muhammad, but in other pagan religions and Gnostic religions. And now I'll go down because I don't want to do the entire article, but I want to go to one more section here. So the Ebionites, actually, let me just do a brief touch on the Ebionites. They derive from the Hebrew word Ebionim, meaning the poor ones, a term adopted by church fathers to refer to a Judeo-Christian sect that existed in the early days of Christianity, which viewed Jesus as the Messiah, but denied his divinity, which tells us something about Islam. They insisted on following Jewish law, which tells us something about Islam, believed only in one of the Jewish Christian Gospels, venerated the righteous James, and did not recognize Paul, whom they considered an apostate. Does this start to sound more and more like Islam as we read through this heretical Christian sect? Emmanuel, you touched on that. Your thoughts, guys?
You're not talking about the Elchasites yet, right?
No, not yet. These are the Ebionites.
But there's so many sects that you get confused. I get confused. Yeah, but yeah, you can see that even though there's so many more that we can't possibly all cover, but they always believe pretty much the same thing. They always say that their prophet is the final prophet, is the seal of the prophets. They always say that Jesus is not God, but that he is usually they actually say, and I think the Elchasites say that as well, that he's like, we can all be Jesus. He's like the perfect man.
Yep.
And especially the Elchasites actually believe that Jesus reincarnates. And they actually believed his first incarnation was actually Adam. So maybe that's also why Adam is so significant and is considered a prophet.
Yeah, we'll get to all of that in the future, but let's not get too far ahead right now.
And of course, this is all very similar to what modern New Age sects believe in and what they call Christ consciousness. But all these sects seem to have these things in common.
Yep. So any comment from you, JC, before I go on?
Yes, briefly, that the stories that you mentioned before. So we can see in order to create the Quran, they took stories in order to compile the book. Then the traditions, that's when the monotheism series really kicks in. They did the same thing with everything. So in the Quran, they took stories from here, from there. When it gets to the traditions, which they're actually not in the Quran, they will also copy from all those regions. And that's actually what Lloyd is exploring in that other series. So we cannot think about, well, first comes the Quran and then everything derives from the Quran. It's like, no. They copied from all of the surrounding areas. That's why we have to look at everything.
So the church fathers consider the Ebionites to be heretical Jews. There is disagreement as to whether the Ebionites and the Nazarenes, and this is a pity why Odon is not here, because he would have then obviously been able to add his thoughts here, and the Nazarenes are two different sects or constitute a single sect, which is what the church fathers believed. So these are heretical Jews. And they were in Jerusalem, oddly enough. And of course, they migrated to other regions and they changed their names, right? They followed the commandments of Moses. They considered Jerusalem to be the holiest city, but they also rejected many of the doctrines of the Nicene Creed, such as the eternity of Christ, his divine and human nature, his virgin birth, and so on and so on. Now, the Ebionites accepted only the Hebrew or Aramaic version of the Gospel of Matthew, referred to as the Gospel of the Hebrews, a sacred text added to the canon of the Hebrew Bible. And they allowed marriage from 2 to 3 times up to 7 times. So you could have 7 different marriages. Interesting. And they had an Injil called the Gospel of the Hebrews. So we're starting to see a couple of oddities running here. Now, a little bit about the Elchasai. According to early Christian and Manichaean sources, Elchasai or Elchasai was the founder of the sect of the Elchasites and the recipient of a book of Revelation, the book of Elchasai. He is also said to be the belief, I'm going to try and zoom in a bit again, but then this page is so badly written. His is also said to be the belief of Mani, of the Manichaeans, the founder of the Manichaeans. According to Epiphanius, the name Elchasai means the hidden power. In Aramaic, it's Hail Kasai. Eusebius, in his ecclesiastical history, composed in the mid-3rd century, notes the following about the Arabian Peninsula and the Elchasites. Once more in Arabia, other persons sprang up, introducing a doctrine foreign to the truth, and saying that the human soul dies for a while in this present time, along with our bodies at their death, and with them turns to corruption, but that hereafter, at the time of the resurrection, it will come to life again along with them. There's come just now a certain man who prides himself on being able to champion a godless and very impious opinion of the Elchasites, as it is called. It rejects some things from every scripture. It has made use of texts from every part of the Old Testament and the Gospels, and it says to deny is a matter of indifference, and that the discreet man will on occasion of necessity deny his religion with his mouth, but not in his heart. Don't we know of exactly the same in the Quran, where a man can deny being a Muslim with his mouth as long as his heart retains faith? This idea was present with the Elchasites, and it is exactly the same idea that is present amongst the Muslims. And they produce a certain book of which they say it has fallen from heaven. In fact, it was given to them by an angel, given to Elchasai, it was given to the founder by an angel. Thoughts, JC?
The Quran is starting to sound very much like the book of Elchasai 2.0.
Yeah, it does look very similar, right? These same stories. So the book, according to Epiphanius, condemned virginity, right? There's a bit more here, incontinence and made marriage obligatory. So you couldn't have a girlfriend. You had to get married if you wanted to, have a girlfriend. It also permitted the worship of cult images to escape persecution, and provided the act was merely an external one, disavowed in the heart. This is exactly what the Quran teaches. Prayer was always to be made towards Jerusalem. And of course, we know that originally the Muslims prayed to Jerusalem before they switched to wherever the heck they did, and finally Mecca. Any thoughts before I move on to the next?
Yeah, let's make that clear so that everyone gets that. So you're talking about the Elchasites. That's you're probably gonna get to that. That's the religion that Mani grew up in. What distinguishes it from Manichaeism mainly is actually that promiscuity is one thing, but other than that, it's relatively similar. And like the Manichaeans, they have a prophet. An angel appeared to that prophet. I think it was even in a cave. Then and while they acknowledge previous prophets, including Jesus, whom they regard as a prophet, they do emphasize that their prophet is the final prophet, is the seal of the prophet. So in a way, their prophet is superior, and likewise, their sacred text is superior to the Bible. They emphasize that a lot. That on the surface they kind of recognize the Bible, but their revelation that was given to their prophet by an angel in a cave is superior to the Bible. They have a Qibla, as you just said. They have a Qibla, and and there's so many other things, and lots of similarities with Islam, obviously.
Yeah, so this would be interesting. Maybe the Quran affirms the book of Elchasai. Yeah. So yeah, there's some odd. So guys, hopefully as an audience you can see there are some odd parallels here. Very interesting parallels with Islam. Some odd connections. So I want to talk about myths, the Apocrypha, the Gnostic Gospels, plagiarism, and the copy-paste Quran. Okay, so this is a Gnostic. This is on the channel, a Gnostic warrior. This is Mo Bedard being a Gnostic warrior. And he's got here this book, The Order of the Gnostics, Ancient Teaching of the Modern Gnostic. Obviously, it's very important. Let's listen to what Mo Bedard has to tell us. A Gnostic is a master at deconstructing the words that make up the very fabrication, which is the invention, the concoction, the falsification, the lie, the untruth, the fairy story tale, right? The fairy story, the fairy tale, cock and bull story, white lie, half-truth, exaggeration of the matrix, the womb of the great mother, darkness in which we live. To truly see the light of the truth of the world, we must realize, in other words, use real eyes, that our inner Lucifer, you get in touch with your inner Lucifer, the fire, the phosphorus, the spirit. Your soul is actually Luciferian, must rise like the serpent on the tree of life, using the logos, reason, to reach Golgotha, the place of the skull. Your brain. You are Jesus. You are God. In order to become illuminated saviors, messiahs, the Christs of yourself. Your own personal Jesus. That's Mo Bedard. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Gnostic.
That's what's basically meant by Christ consciousness as well. When they say they acknowledge Jesus, what they actually mean is they acknowledge this Christ consciousness, and actually they do usually call him Lucifer. So they actually acknowledge Lucifer, and they teach that everyone can be their own savior, their own light bringer. Their own savior, their own light bringer, right? That's what Lucifer means. It means light bringer, and they regard him as the good guy, and they identify him with Jesus. But they don't believe in Jesus the way mainstream Christians do at all.
We believe in Jesus. We believe he was a great prophet. Isn't that what Muslims tell us?
They believe he was a great prophet, and they believe he was an example for all mankind, like some of the other prophets as well, right? He was an exemplary human. We should follow him, and we should do the same that he did, meaning we should follow our inner Christ, our inner Lucifer, our inner light bringer, and we resurrect our inner light and become our own Christ and our own Savior. That's what all this.
I just feel my inner superior being coming out, and I just know that I'm perfect. I can feel
it. Yes, because you are the Christ. You are the Savior. You are Lucifer. You can be your own Savior. And so in a way, if you accuse them of being Satanists, they will reject that because they see Lucifer as the good guy. And also they don't worship Lucifer really, because at the end of the day, they think that they can be their own Lucifer, their own light bringer.
Yeah, pretty disturbing. JC, any thoughts before I go on?
Don't do drugs, kids. It's probably good advice.
That's a good story. That's a good one. That's some helpful advice. Okay, so I want to look at. So there's a few things. I'll tie a whole bunch of pieces together, and we'll try and tie a whole bunch of things together and see if where the path leads. Right, as we open a number of doors and see if they all end up in the same place. This is Islamic and Talmudic jurisprudence, the four roots of Islamic law and their Talmudic counterparts. And the author is Judith Romney Wegner. And this was published in the American Journal of Legal History in 1982. So scholars have found similarities between the Quran and midrashic and biblical sources. But according to the author, the differences suggest that the prophet did not have direct knowledge of those texts. He had second or third-hand knowledge of the Jewish and Christian sources, not directly. Some scholars have also traced to the foundations of Islamic faith and practice, known as the 5 pillars of Islam, to Jewish, biblical, and Talmudic sources. The name Islam, which means wholehearted submission to Allah, is related to a Hebrew word used in scripture and in rituals to encourage wholehearted service to God, Yahweh, the God of the Bible. The 5 pillars are affirmation of monotheistic faith and of Muhammad's apostolate, communal prayer, zakat, fasting, and pilgrimage. Compare, there is no God but Allah, with Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one. That's Deuteroscopy 6:4, the Shema. So these are all central themes. The rest of them are central themes of the Jewish sacred days of judgment, New Year, and Atonement. And the Arabic terms for prayer, almsgiving, fasting, and repentance are not indigenous to Arabia and Arabic, but derived from Hebrew and Aramaic terminology. The Arabic Hajj, pilgrimage, is linguistically identical with the Hebrew Hag, or the pilgrim festival in the Torah. The Quranic Qalb Salf, or the whole heart, as found in Quran 26:89 and 37:84, corresponds to biblical Labab Salem in 1 Kings 8:61, and in the Talmudic Modem prayer recited daily in Jewish communal worship. Arthur Jeffrey points out that although the root Salim is native to Arabic as to Hebrew, the noun Islam occurs in the Quran for the first time as a technical term borrowed from older religions. Any thoughts before I continue?
I will just add, when you said that the person who actually wrote this wouldn't actually have first-hand knowledge of previous scriptures, of the Judeo-Christian scriptures, that is possible, and we go with that for now, but they couldn't actually understand the Quran. Once they started to put the diacritics, they were trying to figure it out. So it is very likely that the book actually used to make sense, but it is through the process of changing the diacritics that now
Could
the
have
whole
been
thing...
derived from these stories, but then it got altered. But I think later on they got hold of a Bible. I would say in the 9th century they got hold of a Bible in Spain. And then they were like, oops.
Yeah, so it could be that the actual original, maybe from the 5th century or something very early, that it made sense. It was very good. But when Islam started, they already couldn't read it, and now it's a mess. And they think that you were created from a liquid emanating from between the backbone and the ribs, and all of that nonsense. It's more likely that they just couldn't read it and they made it out. But for now, we go with they didn't know what they were writing.
Yep. His suggestion that it comes from a Christian Syriac or Aramaic term for devotion to God may be correct. It ignores the fact that the Syrian term stems ultimately from the Hebrew shalem, as used precisely in this context in Jewish scripture and liturgy. So it's, again, we're back to its lectionary, its liturgical work that the Quran is seeming to be originally, and it's been somehow distorted. Oh, by the way, these are the real 5 pillars of Islam, just so you know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sure you have one at all of your markets and festivals. You don't want to be Allahu Akbar, not do you? So, the real 5 pillars of Islam, done. Now, early impressions. Islam was born in the desert, with Arab Sabianism for its mother and Judaism for its father. Its foster nurse was Eastern Christianity. And that's a quote by Sir T.W. Arnold. Now, we can go back to German and English scholars from 200 years ago who had deconstructed Islam and said, but this thing is a farce. It's a joke. This is clearly cobbled together from a bunch of other sources. So, and then we forgot this after World War II, and now we're rediscovering this work again. Islam is not an invention, but a concoction. There is nothing new about it except the genius of Muhammad in mixing old ingredients in a new medicine for human ills and forcing it down by the means of the sword. That is Dr. Samuel M. Zwemmer. Arlette says she's busy sipping her coffee and she almost choked. Oops. We don't want to cause any fatalities. We haven't lost anyone from the stream, but we hope not to have a high fatality count due to the awesomeness of the streams. Yeah, sorry.
That's because coffee is haram and you should not drink it.
Yeah. No, you're right. But kahwa is something that the Arabs stole from the Ethiopians, and then they made it popular. So the Sabaeans. Now let's look at who are the Sabaeans. Why these Sabaeans? This is a Muslim perspective, and this is a book called "Is the Quran Infallible" by Abdallah Abdal Fadi. Muslim writer Muhammad Shukri al-Alusi, who lived 10 December 1802 to 29 July 1854, compared the religious practices of the Sabaeans to Islam in his Bulugh al-Arab fi Ahwal al-Arab. Arabs during the pre-Islamic period used to practice things that were included in the Islamic Sharia. They did not marry a mother and her daughter. They considered marrying two sisters simultaneously to be a heinous crime. They censured anyone who married his stepmother. They made the major Hajj and the minor Umrah pilgrimage to the Kaaba. Now the question is, which Kaaba if these were not Muslims, but Sabaean pagans that were around up to 2,500-3,000 years before Islam was even created. They performed the circumambulation around the Kaaba. They ran 7 times between Mount Safa and Marwa. They threw rocks and they washed themselves after sexual intercourse, things that Muslims do today. They gargled, they sniffed water up into their noses to drive out the shaitan that lives in your nose. They clipped their fingernails, removed all pubic hair, and performed ritual circumcision. Likewise, they cut off the right hand of a thief and they stoned adulterers. These are Muslims as far as I can tell, but these are pagans that predate Islam by at least 1,500 years. Any comments, guys, before I move on?
Incredible. Yep, you have just described practices that are, Islamic and from the right region. Because if someone were doing this like in South America, you would say it's unrelated, but it was right there. So yeah, definitely they copied this from them.
Yeah, it's from exactly the same region. Remember we spoke of the Aksamites and the Yemenis? Well, these guys were Yemenis. These Sabaeans were Yemenis. And the religion spread all the way up into Syria and Turkey and so on. And all of that's going to be relevant in the monotheism series. The Sabaeans have 5 prayers. Good grief. Does anyone know? Anybody can help me name you won't get any prizes though, a religion which has 5 prayers a day? Can't think of one, Emmanuel. Darn it. I'm pretty sure it's Buddhism. I'm sure. It's the name is coming to me, right? Similar to the 5 prayers of the Muslims. Others say they have 7 prayers, 5 of which are comparable to the prayers of the Muslims with regard to time. There's morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and night. The 6th is at midnight, and the 7th is at forenoon. But these are optional prayers. And in Islam, you can also do 2 optional prayers. Oddly enough, isn't that just a weird, pure coincidence? It is their practice to pray over the dead without kneeling down or bending the knee. They also fast 1 lunar month of 30 days. Oh my gosh, aren't Muslims doing that right now? Sorry, no, Muslims are just skipping lunch and then moaning about it on social media and telling everyone else not to eat because Muslims are fasting. Somebody think of the Muslims. They start their fast at the last watch of the night and continue till the setting of the sun, just like the Muslims. Some of their sects fast during the month of Ramadan. Oh, Ramadan was around before these guys. Oh my golly. They face the Kaaba when they pray. They venerate Mecca and believe in making pilgrimage. They consider dead bodies, blood, and the flesh of pigs as unlawful. They also forbid marriage for the same reasons as Muslims. This is 95% Islam right here, and this is a pagan religion going back at least 1,500 years before Islam even came on the scene.
I think you are just reading too much into this. It's just a massive coincidence.
As Quranic Endgame said, there's some guy called Quranic Endgame in the. This guy looks very smart. He says, "Why invent when you can just steal?" Right?
Of course, playing devil's advocate here, but obviously, the correct answer is yes, of course, there will be similarities because they also had a prophet, and obviously, their religion became less corrupted than the Christian religion. So I'm just thinking that's what Muslims would probably say. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, but I think the list of coincidences has been growing. I mean, if we do once we go back to monotheism next week, we're going to start discovering that, man, there are just way too many coincidences and parallels and things that look like copy paste from pagan religions. In the Bulugh al-Arab fi Ahwal al-Arab, we read the 4 sacred months had been considered, and Muharram had been considered sacred during the pre-Islamic period of the Jahiliyyah. Raids, taking revenge, war fighting, and disputes were forbidden. If you met your enemy who killed your father or brother during these months, you would not quarrel with them. During the sacred months, the people were under restriction not to fight or make raids and had to remove their spearheads. As a sign, they would avoid fighting. So obviously, Islam borrowed the hallowing of these months from pre-Islamic Arabs and introduced nothing new into the world. And that's Abdullah Al-Fadi is the Quran Infallible, page 127. It's probably linked in my archive. Check in the description box. Go to the Google archive. You'll find it there. So nothing new under the sun. And the Sabaeans are mentioned in the Torah, and they are the enemies of the Jews. Yeah, the Sabaeans are mentioned. They worship the moon. It's, monotheism. Isn't that odd? All these weird connections. So Muhammad the Sabi, it was said about the Sabians of Haran, that's in Turkey, just over the Syrian border, that they used to make a yearly pilgrim to the pyramids of Egypt. Maimonides said that the Sabians are remnants of the ancient Egyptian priests who practiced hieroglyphic magic, a system of language encoding that can engineer consciousness. Now, earlier we had the Gnostic warrior talking about engineering your consciousness using words, because that's what a monastic warrior does. Well, you've all heard of the Akhruf, right? The 7 Akhruf and all of that, right? You've heard of the Qira'at and the Akhruf, the readings. Well, Huruf, Akhruf is plural of the singular harf, which means letter of the alphabet. Yes, it also means word. In grammar of the Arabic language, it also means a Quranic reading or a dialect. However, that is not all that the word Akhruf means in Arabic. You have the science of the Akhruf or the Huruf, which is onomatomancy, a magical practice, an occult practice, based on the occult properties of the letters of the alphabet and of the divine and angelic names which they form. So it's communion with angels and using words to create magic. It's called letter magic. So, yes, any thoughts before I go on, guys?
Not me, I'm good.
So Thoth of Egypt, right? Thoth was the god of ancient Egypt. He was a moon deity, though they had other deities who also served as moon deities. Thoth is also known as Hermes Trismegistus, and he is the father of Gnosticism. He founded Hermeticism, and out of Hermeticism comes Gnosticism. So let's have a look at Da'if Bukhari. And for Muslims who come on and always tell me, but yeah, you quoted a Da'if hadith, that's called a joke. It's actually Sahih Bukhari. Please learn your Islam. Please learn some of your deen before you come and attack me for quoting a Da'if hadith when I'm joking. It's actually Sahih. She asked, where? And they said, to Allah's messenger. She said, do you mean the man who is called the Sabi? So Allah's messenger, according to the Sahih hadith, Da'if Bukhari, was known as the Sabi, the man with a new religion. They replied, yes, the same person, come along. And they brought her to the Prophet Muhammad, of course. And she said, a strange thing, 2 men met me and took me to the man who is called the Sabi. And this is in Da'if Bukhari, volume 1, book 7, hadith 340. It's also in volume 4, book 56, hadith 725. So Muhammad, according to Islam's own sources, is not a Muslim. He's a Sabaean, and we just discussed who the Sabaeans were. They were a pagan sect that worshipped the moon, that had practices that were 95% the same as Islam. Isn't that an odd coincidence?
Yeah, in hadiths, often we get something like this. It's almost like they are revealing something that should have been removed, and that one is certainly an odd one. Do you know the difference between Sahih and Da'if?
Say again, sorry. Well, what is the difference? Uh, well, it's just that when you quote the Sahih Hadith, it becomes da'if when a Muslim hears it, but when he quotes it, it's legit.
Yeah. Also, basically, the difference between Sahih and Daif is the spelling, which is the ahruf.
Yeah. And the word saba'a means the one who has deserted his old religion and embraced a new religion. Interesting. So Muhammad had deserted an old religion and embraced a new one. Abu Ailia said, the Sabis are a sect of people of the scripture who recite the book of Psalms. We know for a fact, we just spoke about the Sabis. The Sabis are a bunch of moon-worshipping pagans. And now they're supposed to be a people of the book, the Bible of all things, the scriptures, who recite the book of Psalms. Isn't that fascinating? Didn't we just have a bunch of Gnostics and heretical Jews and Christians who recited their own books, who wrote their own Gnostic Gospels, and who recited the book of Hebrews, which was not a canonical Christian book? So Gnostics who use Psalms, and just so by sheer coincidence, Gnostics who are known to have used the Psalms include the Manichaeans, the Sethians, the Valentinians, the Naasians, and the Hermetics. Very interesting. Any comments before I go on?
Jesse, I just want to ask you in earnest, what is the Islamic perspective on this? Are Muslims aware of this? Do they say, "Oh yes, we recognize Mani as one of the previous prophets," even though Mani, of course, is seen as the seal of the prophets, but of course, the Islamic perspective would be that he's not the seal of the prophets. But do they see him as one of the prophets before Muhammad?
I think actually Lloyd has spoken about money, or it may have been Mel.
Well, not necessarily just money. I was just using him as an example for one of those prophets. We could also use what was his name, Elchasai, right? Are Muslims aware of these prophets like Mani and Elchasai, who preached a religion very similar to Islam? And then how do they explain it? Do they explain it by saying, "Oh, these are legitimate prophets that just came before Muhammad, and that's why we have so many coincidences and similarities"?
Okay, so I will explain it like Usama would do, which is Muslims have never read a single book outside of the Quran. That's the only thing that they read and the only thing that they have to believe. All of the information they get is from whatever hadith their imams tells them. That's it. They don't have any knowledge of anything else. Now, if you go to the scholarly circles,
JC, your volume is very low. You want to boost your gain. Emmanuel,
okay.
you may want to pull your gain down. You're very loud, but JC, you're very soft.
Okay, let's see. Is it now any better?
No.
No? Okay, so I will try to fix it actually before the next comment.
Okay. Yeah, so just go on. Just finish your point.
Yeah, on this one, fine. So that they, what these people do is, if someone they can use as saying he was a prophet of Allah, they take it. They took Alexander the Great, who was a polytheist. They've taken, I think it's Buddha, anyone at all. They will say, oh yeah, these people were prophets of Allah. They don't have a history. They don't have a prophet. So anytime they see someone in history they can grab, they will say, this guy was one of ours. Just like the Muslims were the first people to be in every country. All of this is just nonsense. Islam is about taking what other people have. So if you ask a Muslim about money and they happen to know about him, they would say he was one of ours if it is convenient. Otherwise, they will say he wasn't. It's always like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so understand, Gnostics were using Christian texts for a long time. The Gnostics came after Christianity, not prior. Prior, you had all these weird sects, these Jewish-derived. You could vaguely call them Gnostic. There were certain overlaps, but there were Hermetic groups and Kabbalistic groups. And then after the Book of John is completed, then you see about half a decade or less later, you start to see the Gnostic groups start to appear over the next two or three centuries. But again, we're back to the Manichaeans and other groups. And these groups, the Sethians, these are all going to be very important. We're going to learn more about them. It's going to be relevant. Now, the Valentinians believed that the Psalms contained hidden meanings and symbolic teachings that aligned with their Gnostic worldview. Yeah, and Mealy Dave is correct. Starboy the Knight, yeah, please do pay attention and please check things before offering more assertions. We're here not as a platform for your own ideas. We are discussing very specific comments here. So, actually, Starboy, you know what? I am going to now time you out. So I want to put you in time. I'll be nice for 30 minutes. How's that? So he's trying to make distinctions between Arabs and Arabs. Oh, and Muslims came in. What's the nonsense he said? Muslims came in the 4th century. Arabs came in the 7th century. There's a word for that. It starts with a B and it ends with a T. The first word is the opposite of cow, male cow. And the second word is what falls out of the back of a horse. So I don't know where you're getting your ideas, but seriously, you're getting it from the same place that those things fall out of the back of the horse.
Since you mentioned the Sephians, I just want to mention that the Christian Gnostic sect I grew up in, they were Sephians.
Oh wow! Okay, that's going to be relevant. But thank you. So when we get to those sections, it'll be good for us to have a talk about some of these. Yeah, I think JC, I think your volume increased slightly. But this guy was saying Muslim is not Islam. Muslim begins 4th century. Islam begins 610 AD. What crap am I reading here? These people are just good grief. Okay, let us move on. So you can learn more about these things, about the Sabi. You can go to Quran.com. You can go to all of these various websites. This is QuranX, Hadith Bukhari, and you can see those are legit quotes. And the Quran, according to this, is the Encyclopedia of Islam, if I'm correct, or the Encyclopedia of the Quran. The Quran provides the Sabaeans with a religious status comparable to that of the Jews and Christians. Now, which is interesting because from a Jewish and Christian perspective, they're neither Jews nor Christians. They are outright heretics. They are outright pagans. They are by no means in any shape, way, or form Christians. But the Quran doesn't know what Christians and Jews are. So it assigns people who are utterly anti-Christian, anti-biblical in every sense of the word, enemies of Yahweh, assigns them Christian status, which is just nothing short of retarded.
Yeah, I want to really make this point clear so that everybody understands this. When mainstream Christians reject these heretical cults, they're not being mean. You know, it's not like, because that's how we would have painted it back then, right? We would have said, oh yeah, the Catholic Church is so mean. They just want to preserve the power. That's not what this is about. People don't understand. These heretical Gnostic sects we're talking about, they're considered heretical because they literally demonize Jehovah. Jehovah is their devil, and Jesus is their Lucifer, even though they actually like Lucifer, right? But they're literally demonizing the Jewish and Christian God, right? So that's why they're considered heretical.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No. So no.
Yes.
So,
Let me just add one more thing. So on the previous slide, when you said the Quran, they say that basically the Sabians, they are also from the Abrahamic faith. They actually do the same with the Magians, which they are meant to be the Zoroastrians. So it does look like they're pulling from things that are completely different. They might have said that the Buddhists are Abrahamic. So absolute nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen recently they start to claim that Zoroaster was a prophet of Allah because, Allah spoke through different people at different times and blah, blah. I mean, there's that by Shabir Ali, where he speaks about that. So Muslims are starting to make the claim because it's too embarrassing. So they're just rolling with it now.
Yeah, well, that actually is something Islam copied from Manichaeism, but we're not talking about Manichaeism yet.
Yes, Catherine, they are 100% fully heretical. Although I'm going to have to state this outright, because there is no consensus, because there is no objective standard on the Protestant side of things, because there are these outright contradictions and a lack of any unifying creed, literally zero unifying creed on the Protestant side of the fence. How do Protestants declare heresy? That's almost impossible. So if you read through the Catholic church fathers, they ascribe all of these people to be heretics because they've got a single objective standard. But when you've got different churches on the Protestant side that have completely antithetical beliefs, completely irreconcilable, incompatible, and contradictory beliefs. I've covered those extensively. When you look at the founders of these churches and the things they believe, like the Baptist Church, the founder believed the most bizarre things. You can't even call the man a Christian for believing the things that he believed, but he founded the Baptist Church. He's a great Christian when the man was utterly unchristian. And yeah, so that's another issue. But clearly they don't believe in the God of the Bible, that's for sure. So Thoth or Hermes in Islam, the wisdom literature of Egyptian Hermeticism, ended up as part of Islamic tradition. So that's interesting. So an Egyptian pagan god who was worshipped as the moon, very interesting, he becomes part of Islamic tradition. And his writings are considered by the Abbasids as sacred inheritance from Allah. And it's from the prophets and Hermes himself as the ancestor of the Prophet Muhammad. But these are literal pagan gods, the gods of the Romans, the gods of the Greeks. So he is now Hermes. This is insane because he's the same god. He's Hermes, and he's also, I believe, Jupiter, one of the gods in the Roman and the Greek pantheon. So the Egyptian pantheon, the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon have the same god, which is insane. And now he's supposed to be a good Muslim. The man is literally a moon god, but he's a good Muslim.
Lloyd, it's Mercury.
Mercury, yeah.
It's Thoth in Egyptian paganism. It's Hermes with the Greeks, and with the Romans, it's Mercury. So these are all planetary deities, but it's all based on the same planet, and the planetary object is actually Mercury.
Yep, and so you've got Hermeticism, and when you read through the Hermetics, you saw the Gnostic statement I opened up with. I mean, this is all retarded stuff. You read through what the Hermetics believed. It's got nothing to do with Islam, except if you're into pagan, non-Christian stuff. And then, of course, these guys they become co-opted as Muslims and precursors to the Muslims. So in the version of the Hermetic text kept by the Ikhwan al-Safa, Hermes Trismegistus is identified as the ancient prophet Idris. Idris is recognized, I think, the third or the fourth prophet in the Quran, or the second prophet in the Quran, and he's known as Enoch. So Idris is somehow... Yes?
This is a planetary deity. This is Mercury. So Muslims officially recognize Mercury, a planetary deity. So how are they not?
Yeah, we're gonna get into all of this. This is just the weirdest stuff. Exactly, but he's a good Muslim. He's a prophet of Allah, but he's Idris. He's Enoch. Enoch in the Bible. He's Idris. I think the second mentioned prophet in the Quran or something like that. But he's Hermes Trismegistus. He's literally a pagan god. According to their tradition, Idris traveled from Egypt into heaven and Eden, bringing the black stone back to earth when he landed in India. Okay? And the star-worshipping sect known as the Sabians of Haran, we just spoke about them, also believed that their doctrine descended from Hermes Trismegistus, the founder of Hermeticism, the god that founded... Oh my God. None of this makes any sense with Islam. JC, say something, please.
I am confused, so please carry on.
Me too. None of this makes sense. For the audience, does any of this make sense? How does this match the founding standard Islamic narrative, the standard false Islamic narrative? So you can go to Hermes, right, in the Encyclopedia of the Quran, an Encyclopedia of Islam, Volume 10 and Volume 3. Right, so have a look here. This is the Encyclopedia of the Quran. It's a huge book. It's 6,000 pages. Idris. So they speak of apocalyptic literature, which is going to be very relevant because the Quran is very apocalyptic. And the sect, as Odin would speak of, was a sect that was highly apocalyptic, focused on the end times, coming in the next 100 years. And Albright claimed that Idris is a corruption of the last two syllables of the word poimandres, the most important work of Hermetic literature. Gill suggested that Idris is a corruption of the name Hermes, a name that has reached the Arabs in the form of Hermes. So it may be possible to discover the missing link between the name Idris and Enoch by the name of the Qumran scrolls. This is where the Qumran scrolls, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls, these scrolls are based on the previously extant Enoch literature. Now notice Poimandres is the book that was left behind, that was written, that was created by Hermes Trismegistus. This is his magic book, you know, the book in the sky or whatever, the secret book with all the knowledge, the Poimandres. So yeah, the Quran, oh good God. Anyway, does all this starting to make some kind of sense here, guys?
Not really, but let's keep going.
Yeah, but so yeah. And Hermes, now we go to the Encyclopedia of Islam. Hermes, also known as Hermes, Hermes Trismegistus, that strange god incarnate, a god incarnate on the one hand, the Hellenistic or Greek name of the Egyptian god Thoth. So Hermes is the Greek name of the Egyptian god Thoth. He's also the author of philosophical, scientific, and magical works. See, a book, a magical book, a book that has all the knowledge, you see, of philosophy, science, and magic. Ooh, wonder what the Muslims could be. Anyway, and he passed in his capacities into Islam. Islam, it is true, transformed the god into one of the heroes of olden times, who, according to his name, Trismegistus al-Mutalab al-Hikmah, he brought the hikmah to the world. Oh my gosh, the hikmah, he's the source of the hikmah. And he appears divided into three individuals. The first Hermes is identified with Ahnuh, or Enoch, and Idris. He lived in Egypt before the flood, and he built the pyramids. And see Haram, their name being connected with his. So the word haram in the ancient Egyptian religion was for a pyramid. And of course, the Muslims are big on their haram. Don't go into the haram, the haram where they worship. So, which is the pyramid, which is the Egyptian religion, which you were going to start finding a lot of odd connections. Any thoughts before I go on?
Maybe just clarifying this. So, sorry, are you saying that they believe in Islam that there was this pagan god who incarnates, which goes against Islam, and then he gave some hikmah to the world, which then became Islam, which
through a book.
Through a book. Okay, fine. I get you now. Yeah, that makes sense now.
I understand that for Muslims, this all this stuff is gonna be hard to believe because they've probably never heard this before. But if you are a Muslim scholar, then you will know this stuff, and I know this stuff, and I recognize all this stuff because this is the stuff we were into: Hermeticism, Gnosticism, right? That's why it's called Hermeticism, because it's founded supposedly on Hermes Trismegistus, which remember, means the thrice great Hermes. That's probably also why he's subdivided into three different people. So this is all from my perspective, I can confirm this is all accurate, even though many Muslims might not be familiar with this. This is true. This is what we taught as well.
Yeah, and we should know that Muslims are all big on, Islam brought science to the world. Yeah, occult science. Look at the science they're talking about here. This is not science. This is occult science that Islam brought into the world. Yeah, these Muslim scholars have no intelligence. So, and he wrote down the scientific achievements of the first men in order to preserve them from destruction and loss by the flood. The second, Al-Babili, lived after the flood in Babylonia. Oh my God, he came from Babylonia. They inherited more information from Babylon. He revived the study of the sciences. Notice this is not going to be that, the value of pi, the speed of light. This is not that kind of science, because you know that Islamic science is not that kind of science. He migrated to one version in the Fihrist to Egypt. Oh my God, now we're back to the pyramids again. And the third wrote after the flood in Egypt about various sciences and crafts. So we've got ties to Babylon and Egypt. And you may have noticed that all of these things that we're talking about here have ties to Babylon and Egypt and Islam as well.
To be really clear, I think, and Lloyd, you know this better than I do, and you explained this in some of your talks. Muslim scholars know this kind of stuff. The actual scholars know it.
No,
the mainstream. It's only the mainstream followers that don't know, because
Correct.
Similar to Manichaeism, there is a two-tiered structure in Islam. Islam got a lot of things from Manichaeism and from all these various sects, and they were two-tiered. The cult I grew up in was two-tiered as well. So you have your mainstream followers, they don't know Jack, and you have the scholars and the leaders, they know this stuff. But it's just because it's a two-tiered society that the mainstream followers don't.
Correct. So there are some serious problems. Islam has 4 tiers. Islam has 4 tiers. And actually need to set up my index. I reinstalled my
Well,
computer. I need to set up my
Okay, well,
index.
I didn't know that Islam actually had 4, because we only had 2, and Manichaeism likewise only has 2.
Let me actually find it for you. I'll actually show you the multiple tiers of Islam. So
It's basically with us and with the Manichaeans, it was basically, your mainstream followers, and then you have the leaders, and the leaders are in a totally separate category, and they're allowed to do things that the mainstream followers would never be allowed to do. Basically, they have a different set of rules, right? And the main purpose of the mainstream followers is to provide for the leaders.
Yeah, the slaves must not be given the truth. So here are the 4 divisions. So Islam has 2 divisions and 4 levels, right? You have 2 divisions, you have 4 levels. And the 2 divisions, on the one side, imagine on the left-hand side, you have the Sharia. That's the law, the rules that you follow. This is not about an internal devotion. This is just about do this or else. We chop off your hand. Basically, this is the legislative aspect, right? This is the law. So the Sharia is how you obey Allah, right? The Sharia, this is obeying Allah, doing what the hell you're told. This is called the outer worship, the Zahir, right? Outer worship, how you demonstrate, how you show off, for that matter, that you're a good Muslim by doing. So this is outer meaning, outer practice. It is outer experience. This is the first or the plain level of meaning. Then on the second division, the other division, the higher level, which basic Muslims, your average Muslim is not entitled to this. He doesn't achieve this. He doesn't know about this. This is purely for the higher level imams, explicitly the Sufis. You have the haqiqah, the knowledge, the spiritual level. So you have the legal level, just the legal level, and the spiritual level. The haqiqah is knowing Allah. It is the batin. It is the inner, the esoteric knowledge, or the covert knowledge, the secret knowledge, if you will. So the inner, esoteric, the secret, right? Then this is the inner, direct, personal knowledge, experience, or the gnosis of Allah. This is where you subjectively merge with Allah. You merge your soul. You basically go on a communal journey. You commune out of your body, and you enter the throne room of Allah, and you become one with Allah. I now become one with Allah's consciousness. In fact, I am filled with the spirit of Muhammad. I have the spirit of Allah within me. I have the power. That's the gnosis, the true. So there are 4. So that's the 2 sides. Okay, the 2 divisions, Sharia and Haqiqah. Then you have 4 levels. The base. All Muslims are at this level. The Ibadah. That's the literal, the Zahir. This is called, literally, they call it Islam for the masses. You're the legislative subjects. Just do what the hell you're told. The higher level, the second highest for your basic imams, is the Ishara, the implied, where you learn things that are implied, things that are alluded to, a sign, a gesture. You don't have all the knowledge, but you're starting to see the secret writing between the lines. This is for the legislative practitioners, your imams. Then you get to your senior guys. Now, this is the heavy level, okay? The Lata'if, the nuances, the subtleties, these are for the spiritual practitioners. So the first 2 levels are legalistic. The last 2 levels, now you get into the spiritual aspect of Islam. And then lastly, the Haqqa'iq, the reality, the truth, the divine essence. These last 2 levels are for the Sufis. Does that help?
Yeah, Lloyd, you just explained Gnosticism. You didn't just explain Islam. You explained Gnosticism. This is all very, very Gnostic. And actually, I'm surprised because I didn't know that. Islam seems to have a term and a concept of gnosis.
Yes, it does. No, it explicitly says it's Gnostic. It explicitly says it's Gnostic. And the Sufis are the Gnostics of Islam. They are these guys on the bottom level here, levels 3 and 4.
JC, how do you pronounce that?
Haqqa'iq.
Okay.
The fabric of reality. Muhammad is the fabric. Think of it as the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is what God used to create creation, right? He used the Spirit created everything, right? Through the Spirit, He made everything.
No,
But
this is
Jesus
exactly
is made up
what
of the
we
Holy
taught.
Spirit, and Muhammad is made up of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And so therefore you are also merged with the Holy Spirit now.
Yes.
You are one
Yeah,
with the Spirit.
that is what we taught as well at the higher level, not at the ordinary followers level, but at the at the higher tier. That is exactly what we taught.
Yeah. Well, so there you go. So I'll leave that there for a moment. So yeah, so hopefully you've learned something useful from that, everyone. So let us continue. So now let's go to Sahih Bukhari, good manners and form. Some Sabi, i.e., war prisoners, children and women only, were brought before the Prophet, and a woman amongst them was milking her breast to feed, and whenever she found a child amongst the captives, she took it over to her chest and she nursed it. She had lost her child, but later she found him. The Prophet said to us, "Do you think that this lady can throw her son in the fire?" We replied, "No, if she has the power not to throw it in the fire." The Prophet then said, "Allah is more merciful to slaves than this lady to her son." But it's interesting. Why would he be talking about people throwing their children into the fire? Well, this is something that certain pagan groups did. That's part of their worship, to throw children in the fire. So, same nonsense, different clothes.
You
Right.
want me to explain? I can explain this real fast. Where this actually comes from. This is just your typical pagan stuff. Again, the origin of paganism are the planetary objects, and so this is all based on planets. And Saturn is associated. Well, Saturn is, of course, in Greek it's Kronos, and he is said to devour, to eat his children. Even here in Germany, we still have this also, same thing in ancient Germanic paganism. We have the myth and the figure of the Lloyd fresser, yeah, the people eater. And that's associated with Saturn, and in all the pagan religions, Saturn is seen as the one who eats his children. That's where this comes from. And that was seen as a means to appease him. So if you sacrificed your child, preferably your firstborn, to Saturn, then you could appease Saturn and you were blessed. And that's why they did that. That's why they would sacrifice their children.
Yeah. I just want to mention Spice Boy, who's back again. Obviously, he has his head right up his butt, but this is his favorite line. Oh, does Jesus pray to himself? Now, of course, Allah is just a little piece of rock in the middle of the desert. So Allah is very basic. Whereas, of course, you have the Christian God who is a lot more competent. In fact, Allah is so incompetent, he can only be a rock in the desert. He cannot come down to earth. So Allah supposedly made the earth, but is only able to come down to the lowest parts of heaven and actually can't come into there. So Allah's pretty weak. Also, Allah can't speak English. So Allah doesn't know what I'm saying. He only speaks Arabic, right? And Allah's got a number of other shortcomings, but on that point, you've got God who is unlike, Allah's also unlike anything we know. So he's got two right hands, he's got one shin, he's got a vagina clinging to his leg, and all sorts of, he's deformed. He's a deformed midget as far as we can tell. But of course, you've got God, who is a lot more complex than humans can comprehend, right? He's beyond us, but he has three different personalities that merge as one. He can actually have a son. Allah cannot have a son. Allah is incapable. Allah is weak. He's kind of a low-tier, comic level God, whereas the God of the Bible can have a son. He can be born, and he can actually then, as a human, become as a human, understand the human condition, and of course pray. So these are difficult things. Whereas Allah is just completely, Allah basically only knows how to throw bombs and chop off heads. Yeah.
I just want to comment on this from a Gnostic pagan perspective, because it's very interesting again. So you already explained Gnosticism. Basically, there is this concept of the source God, and it seems, especially Sufi Islam and this kind of more Gnostic Islam aligns very much with that. Allah, of course, cannot have a son. Not physically possible, because he is like basically immaterial. And he's not personified. He cannot be personified. That is
Yeah, because he's Gnostic.
the
He's
Gnostic
spirit
and,
only.
and pagan perspective.
The flesh is
Well,
evil.
for the Gnostic perspective, actually, in paganism, it would be possible to personify him, but the Gnostic in Gnosticism, the ultimate source God cannot be personified. The only thing you can do is you have this divine spark, and his divine spark then of course inspired Jesus. Jesus is inspired through his divine spark by the ultimate source God. That's the Gnostic perspective. So of course, that ultimate source God cannot actually be personified. That would be their perspective.
Yeah, that would be dirty. Also, Allah prays for Muhammad. Allah and his angels prayed for Muhammad. So who the hell did they pray to? Also, if you go into the Sharia, amongst other things, I showed previously, and I've showed this many times, when you read the Sharia, it explicitly states that Islam is Gnostic, a Gnostic religion. But also, you learn in Islam that the world and what is in it are accursed. Whereas in the Christian Bible, right, within the Jewish and Christian Bible, you learn that God made the world and it was good. Of course, Gnostics believe that the world is cursed. Matter is cursed. Matter is evil, and only spirit is good. In other words, imagination is good, right? And Islam actually goes with the Gnostic belief that the world is accursed. You can see this right here. That is the Gnostic belief that Islam happens to share because it is a Gnostic religion. So just something to bear in mind, right? So let's talk about this. Can a lady throw her son in the fire? Right? So let's have a look at that. So let's look at Moloch or Moloch. The Bible passage that speaks against Moloch and throwing children into the fire is Leviticus 18:21, which says, "You shall not give any of your offspring to offer them to Moloch, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." So this prohibits the Israelites from sacrificing their children to Moloch, a god of the Ammonites and the Moabites. Of course, Muslims love to do human sacrifice. They'll sacrifice their kids with little bombs attached to their belts and that kind of thing, right? And they'll burn them alive in fire. And this is an abomination in the eyes of the Lord. Now, other relevant passages include Leviticus 20:1-5, which says that anyone who sacrifices their child to Moloch will be cut off from their people and will bear the guilt of the child's death. But of course, Muslims celebrate the murder of their kids through suicide bombing. 2 Kings 23, which described King Josiah's attempt to abolish this practice, saying that he did away with the horses that the kings of Judah and dedicated to the sun at the entrance to the temple of the Lord near the chamber of Nathan Melech, the officer in charge of the god. And Jeremiah 7, which states that the children they sacrifice here will become their food, and they will sacrifice them here to Baal. But they will eat, but not have their fill. They will prostitute themselves, but not increase. They have abandoned the Lord, so he has desecrated them. So these are part of biblical themes on protecting and preserving human life, especially children, and condemning practices that are considered cruel and unjust. Now, let's have a look at Quran surahs that are named after pagan deities. Quran 36. Yasin, the heart of the unholy Quran. So the meaning Yasin is, according to Muslim scholars, unknown. It is debated amongst Muslim scholars. One interpretation that says, "Oh, human being." It is representative of the divine origin of the Quran. We know that Sin, though, is the name of the Babylonian moon god. JC.
Yeah, important question. If you have 2 right hands and only one shin or one leg, how do you stay balanced? You must wobble a lot. I mean, why wouldn't you trust that God? Doesn't look pagan to me?
Yeah, where's the vagina that's clinging to his shin?
Wait, so he has male and female aspects, or even parts?
Yeah, because if you read some of the Sufi stuff, they'll say that Allah is externally male, but internally in his secret core, Allah is actually female. That Allah is a woman. So externally male, internally female. So Allah is actually a woman.
Very, very interesting, because that reminds me of another of a certain other deity with that attribute.
Yeah, it's half male, half female. Yes, you know what? We can really get drawn off track with this discussion. That's yeah. Yeah.
Also, it seems that a lot of you just made that point. A lot of the names in Islam are names of pagan deities. You just made that point, and I just want to add a lot of the. And you also just mentioned some of these terrorists. A lot of the Islamic terrorist organizations also seem to have names that sound weirdly similar or even the same as pagan deities. ISIS. And what's the other one? You mentioned that before, right? Hamas? Is that you mentioned that as a
Yeah.
pagan deity, right?
Correct. You know what? Yeah, but let's not get too off track. Well, you know what? Keep that. Put a pin in
Yeah.
that. We'll come back to that one.
And of
So
course, yeah, yes, exactly. I was referencing
Baphomet.
Baphomet, yes, and of course,
So
Baphomet. Very interesting. Here again, you have the moon, and of course, the whole name Baphomet is actually just a
Muhammad. It's actually the
bastardization of.
Baphomet is actually
Yeah,
a French corruption of the name Muhammad. And notice you've got a guy with now here they've got a medical staff with the two snakes around it. Let's just say in the original drawing, it's got a something else here, not a different kind of staff. Let's just say coming out of his pants.
yeah, isn't
Something,
that? Yeah, I know, I
and
know
he's
the
got
original
boobies.
drawing,
And he's got
but
boobies. You're talking
but
about a
what
Hamas.
what they have. What they have here is actually a reference to Hermes, I think, right? Isn't that Hermes' staff? Since we were
Yeah,
just
well,
talking about Hermes, isn't that
honestly, I have
Hermes'
no
staff?
idea. Honestly, I have no idea. But let's not get too off track here. We'll come back to this. But there's definitely something we can talk about again. Put a pin in that one. We'll come back to that topic. So in Quran 54, you have Al-Qamar, the moon, which is the moon god. So in Quran 55, you have Ar-Rahman, which is basically it's an Arabization of God, right? But it's their variant or version of it. Quran 53, you've got Al-Najm, the star. These are all these solar deities, these things based on constellations, things based on sun, moon, stars, right?
Yeah, I think Raman that refers to Rama, right? The Indian deity, right? Rama.
No. Rahman, this is actually something you'll find in the. I don't know who Pankaj. I have no idea who you are. I'm going to put you in timeout for 30 minutes because I have no idea what you're talking about. So please go away. Rahman would be Rahmanan, which is basically Rahmanan was in the 5th century. It was when the Ethiopians, the Aksumite kingdom, when they took over Arabia, when they conquered Arabia and they were running Arabia, Rahman was the God of the Bible. So you had Rahmanan and his son and the Holy Spirit. So you had his son. So this, and then of course, 200 years later, when Islam starts, then or 150 years, whatever later, when Islam starts, they also create gods called Rahman or Rahmanan. But the original reference in the inscriptions is that is the God Yahweh.
I didn't know that.
Well, Let Up North says, no wonder I was pagan, then easily went to Islam before. I thought it was unrelated. Apocrypha, pagan rituals. Yeah, Islam is totally pagan. I'm seeing it clearly now. That's very interesting. Perhaps you want to come on and talk about that for a couple of minutes, Alet, explain that journey. That's interesting. So, yeah. So, yes, that is from Rahmana, epithet from the Jews for God. Yeah, exactly. And that's what the Ethiopians were using. So we've got in Quran 67, Al-Mulk, Al-Malik, or the king, the dominion, Molek, Akkadian Molek, otherwise known as Molek, and people would sacrifice their children to him. They would burn them in the fire. Quran 85, Al-Buruj, the constellations, the mansions of the stars, At-Tariq, the morning star, Venus, Sirius, Canopus. And the Quran is actually oriented on Canopus, right? So the Quran is actually angled towards Canopus. It's actually astrologically aligned. You have Quran 91, Ashams, the sun. Quran 34, Sabah, Sheba, right? The Sabaeans, right? And so you've got all of these references in Quran texts that are named after pagan deities.
And here we have Lucifer again, the morning star. That's what Lucifer means, the light bringer, the morning star.
Yeah. This stuff gets really weird. Okay, I'll skip over this one. Now, oddly enough, Allah is the Lord of Sirius. Okay, the Lord of Sirius is the moon god Shin, right? The head of the pantheon. In Western pantheons, the sun is the major deity and male. Whereas in Arabic pantheons, what you had was the moon is the major deity and it is male and the sun is female, and the stars are the children that they have, right? Quran 53:49, An-Najm, the star, and he, Allah alone, is the Lord of Sirius. You can see it here. It's in the Quran, and he alone is the Lord of Sirius. Allah of the Quran is the Lord of Sirius. And the footnote, quite literally, in this is Quran.com, says a star worshipped by some ancient pagans. Allah is the Lord of Sirius. If Allah is the Lord of Sirius, then Allah is the head of an astrological pantheon, the Babylonian pantheon.
Sirius is here as well. Sirius is the morning star, Lucifer. So Allah is the Lord of Lucifer, of the morning star.
Yeah, isn't this just a crazy one? JC, your thoughts? So I just want to say thank you to Phil. $10 from Phil. I read some hadiths that said Momo's companions collected his blood to drink, his ablution water, and spit to bathe, and asked for blessing. Sounds pagan to me. I was shocked the companions left that in. Oh, disgusting. Thank you, Phil. God, that's a brain-stabbing image if ever there was one. Yeah. So before we go on, JC, any thoughts you want to add?
Yes, about this, I know how Muslims would spin this. It would be equivalent as if you said, well, Jesus is the Lord of, the Greek gods, for example, and people would understand like, okay, so those don't exist. So Jesus is Lord over everything. That's how they would spin it. But I think what we can learn from here is that they were familiar with those traditions, and that's very important because we can see from the other series that you've been showing that they are borrowing from these traditions, so they are very well aware of them. So very important.
So Islam is literally borrowing from dozens of different pagan and Gnostic and astrological traditions. I mean, there's nothing original. It is just taking something from everything. So Sirius was worshipped by Nabonidus. King Nabonidus was the king of Babylon. Now, he was defeated or something. There was some issue. And he left Babylon and he traveled to Arabia, just north of Mecca, assuming Mecca was around back then in the day. And he established himself for 10 years in Mecca and he spread his religion. Isn't that a sheer coincidence? Only once is a star mentioned in the Quran by its old Arabic name, and that he is the Lord of Al-Shirra. Okay? وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّرَّةِ. Al-Shirra is the star Alpha Canis Majoris, also known as Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, which was worshipped by Arab tribes before Islam. And here the Quran tells us that Allah, the creator of all, is the Lord of Sirius. So Shin was the head of this pantheon of gods, the Babylonian moon god called Shin, also known as Mecca. You tell me what it says. Also known as Allah by the Yemenis, by the Sabaeans who knew him. So the Sabaeans would call him Mecca. You may have heard of a city in Arabia called Makkah, very important to the Muslims. Also known as the Babylonian god Shin, also known as Allah, long before Muhammad was alive. The moon god Shin was the head of this pantheon of gods. Shin is therefore the Lord of Sirius. Sin must therefore be Allah. Thoughts, guys?
Yeah,
okay. Everyone's in shock here.
No. We talked about that before. That your whole series about monotheism was basically about that point, that it's an ancient pagan planetary deity. Yes, I completely agree, and we could get more into this, but I think maybe this is not the right time.
Yeah, so in Tafsir al-Jalalain, they say this is a star lying beyond the constellation of Gemini, which was worshipped in the time of pagandom. So why would Allah be the head of a pagan god? I thought there's no other god. Why is Allah in a pagan pantheon being in charge of other pagan gods? And in Ibn Abbas, and that he it is who is the Lord of Sirius, which was worshipped by the Khuzah. And when you look at the Khuzah, you just get back to Haran and you get back to the Sabians. Oh my gosh. Anyway. So yeah, this just gets... So the Banu Khuzah is the name of an Azadite Qahtanite tribe, one of the main ancestral tribes of the Arabian Peninsula, and they ruled Mecca. Oh my God. So they ruled Mecca for a long time prior to Muhammad. They lived in Yemen and then they moved north. They also worshipped Manat. Oh my gosh, and Muhammad named one of his sons after Manat, and Muhammad and his wife worshipped these gods, Alat, Manat, and Al-Uzza. And Khuzā became custodians of the Kaaba. So the Khuzā became custodians of the sacred house, the Kaaba, passing the duty on from father to son for 500 years. And one of them brought an idol called Hubal to Mecca from Syria. And they are connected to Muhammad genealogically. And Hubal, of course, Muhammad was consecrated to Hubal by his grandfather when he was a baby in the Kaaba. Isn't that all just a weird set of coincidences?
Well, the more you talk, the more Abrahamic Islam actually sounds, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Pure monotheism, of course. Hubal is Baal, right?
Yep.
And what was it? Monad? Isn't that from the Satanic Verses?
Yep. That's right.
Yep. So this is pretty retarded. So, guys, I'll go for like another 5 minutes or so. This is just an introduction because it's a lot of threads I'm tying together. There's a bunch of things I'm trying to put on the table just to lay some groundwork. Yeah, Manat, one of the daughters of Allah, exactly. So, Tawhid is just the unification of all the idols. Yep. So, let's look at Gerd Kuhn, okay? This is Islam, The Hidden Origins of Islam by Karl-Heinz Ohlig and Gerd Kuhn. New research into its early history, Syrian and Arabic Christianity and the Quran, page 367. So they speak here of Hellenistic influences, that's the Greek, as well as Persian influences. And, okay, they speak of Gnostic movements were quite at home in the region of Syria. For example, Marcionism had spread into Syria. This is one of the earliest, this is probably the earliest heretic. No, actually, no, he's not the earliest. That would be Simon the Magician. But Marcionism is probably the second most and very famous heretic of the early period from the 2nd century. Marcionism spread into Syria and Ostroene from the end of the 2nd century onwards. In addition, both the Odes of Solomon and the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas appeared in Syria in the 2nd century. You had the Song of the Pearl in the apocryphal Acts of Thomas, and most likely also the Gospel of Philip. Notice that all of these Gnostic books are always named after apostles, always named after famous people. It's never the Gospel of Frank, the Gospel of Jimmy from the dime store. It's always named after someone famous. Further, both books of Jehu, in which Seth plays an important role. We'll get to Seth as well as Sethian Gnosticism and the related Barbelo-Gnosticism transmitted in the Apocryphon of John. And this should also be ascribed to this region, Syria, right? The northern Levant. This is certainly also true of the Mandaeans from Manda. Mandaeans, Mani, from Manda, the gnosis or the knowledge. See, they are Gnostic as well, who appeared in southern Iraq and Iran, and of their literature, these Mandaeans used the name the Nazareans. Does that sound, Nazareans? Anyone heard of those guys? JC? Nazareans sound familiar?
Yeah, I'm sure that if Odin was here, he would actually give us a lot more detail about that. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And they're called the Sabians in the Quran. Oh my golly, the Nazareans are called the Sabians in the Quran. And Manichaeism, so those are the Sabians we just spoke about. We spoke at length about the Sabians. And the Quran identifies the Sabians as people of the book. And here we find out they are Manichaeans who are freaking crazy Gnostics who believe in the moon gods and they believe in pagan gods and they believe in all sorts of whatever. And Manichaeism appeared in the 3rd century in Persia and spread eastward as far as North Africa and Italy. And Persia is going to be important for us, right? Because once we go into the book of Elchasai, we go to Persia first. And so, yeah, so to the audience, is any of this making sense so far? Do all these little threads, are they starting to connect? Are we starting to connect dots here that somehow connect Islam, but all somehow seem to connect to paganism and maybe not Abrahamic religion? You guys, yes, please go ahead.
I just want to add, since it mentions that the Gospel of Thomas appeared in Syria, at least in the 2nd century, but I would argue that at least before the time of Muhammad, even though I'm starting to think it might be a completely different time altogether, but before the 7th century, the infancy gospel of Thomas must have appeared in Syria and in the Arab regions as well, because well, the Quran actually directly copies the infancy gospel of Thomas.
Thomas. Yeah, it copies. I mean, we did the series a couple of over the 2 weeks. I did the series where we went through about 20 different stories from the Quran, and they all are taken from different Gnostic gospels or from legends or myths, children's tales told by Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, told by Persians, told by you name it. But they borrowed. There's nothing in the Quran that's original. I mean, literally stories that people made up to tell kids, and now suddenly becomes the revelation of Allah.
Right. For those who don't know, because I feel this is important, if you don't know what I'm referring to, the Quran has a lot of stories, and the Quran actually attributes a lot of incredible miracles to Jesus. Actually, in the Quran, Jesus is much more powerful than he is in the mainstream Christian Bible. In the Quran, Jesus performs all kinds of miracles, including creating new life from clay. And that's one of the stories from the infancy gospel of Thomas. That comes from the infancy gospel of Thomas. That's not recognized by mainstream Christianity at all. That's considered completely heretical in mainstream Christianity, but it's in the Quran.
I actually spoke of that on Monday. I did a series of that on Monday, going through all of those stories and showing where they came from. And all of it's taken from Gnostic sources, from known mythical sources, pre-existing Muhammad. So JC, last words to you. So I think we can wind up here. That's fine now. It's an hour and a half. I think we can call it a day here. And then I will restream this to your channel later, Emmanuel. We can make a plan for tomorrow. But JC, any thoughts?
Well, I'd say the connection that you showed about people saying that Muhammad was a Sabi, and then showing, okay, well, let's look at the Sabians, and then showing all of those different traditions that they are not in the Abrahamic faith. The Jews don't do it, the Christians don't do it,
Yep.
but the Sabians do it. It's like, come on, when you are looking for a smoking gun, I think that one is a very clear one, that their traditions, they don't come from the Abrahamic faith, they come from the culture of these first Muslims, whenever that was. So I think that's very, very clear. Well done.
Correct. Agreed. Emmanuel, last word to you.
Well, yeah, that I have nothing else to add. That's
okay.
What I just said is what I wanted to add.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so guys, so look, I think you can see every single idea that comes out of Islam is predated in some pagan religion, in literal Babylonian religion, because the Yemenis had adopted the Babylonian religion. They just changed the names of the gods to suit their language and culture, but it was the same pantheon, the same gods. So different names, but exactly the same deities. And these people were in Africa. They were and they were also buying. They were trading with the Greeks. They were trading with the Romans. They were trading with India, possibly even China. They were very powerful empires of the day, the third, fourth, fifth largest empires in the world at the time. And they were bringing gods from Greece and and so on, and putting them in Yemen. And they controlled Arabia. They controlled the routes, the trading routes on land, on sea. So Islam has been borrowing from all of these sources. And as we go through the series, we will start to explain how all of these eventually tie. But you can see Islam is clearly taken from a bunch of pagan religions that go back 3,000 years. They're twice as old as Islam. And Muhammad was raised, his whole culture was raised in those pagan religions. So I hope this has been helpful, that you've learned something. Thank you. Please leave your comments. Let's hear your thoughts. We'll be back to talk about this again. And thank you for supporting the channel. Please support our guests as well. Emmanuel, if you can send me your info, whatever you'd like, then I'll put that up in a comment. And of course, JC, everyone knows who JC is, I think. So look up Quranic Endgame. And guys, thank you very much. And we shall see you all next time. Take care.
God bless.